This series just keeps getting better and better. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another video. Let's talk about The Mandalorian Chapter 2, The Child. We join the Mandalorian back after the events of Chapter 1 as he's traveling alongside the child, but he is attacked by Trandoshan bounty hunters who are carrying similar fobs as he was carrying. Evidence enough that he'll most likely come under fire from the rest of the guild for this particular target. The question is whether or not he delivers the target live or if he ends up helping the child in trying to find refuge and safety from all of these bounty hunters. And then he comes back to his ship to find that it's been stripped of its parts by the Jawa. The friggin' Jawa, they're everywhere. His attack on their fortress is thwarted and he finds himself at a loss. And it's at this point where the child shows a little bit of what he's going to show later in the episode by trying to help the Mandalorian heal his injuries by slowly hovering his hand over the wound. And we know in the Star Wars universe what it means to hover your hand over something. Yeah, shit's about to get real. But seeking further help, he returns to Kuil on his moisture farm. But Kuil is, all but too familiar with how the Jawa operate. And he tells the Mandalorian, listen, you're not going to get your parts. You're going to have to trade with them. You're gonna have to meet with them. He's gonna show him to the Jawas and they're going to negotiate for your parts, and he has spoken. And while this is all happening, the child eats a frog, and I'm gonna be talking about this in my review of this episode. The child is just so endearing. Everything, they did a really good job of animating this child, but everything it does, the head movements and the body movements and just the things it does, the way it carries itself, it's just I can't, I'm drawn to it every time it's on screen, and I'm paying close attention to what it's doing. So after meeting with the Jawa, it turns out that the Mandalorian has to go and get an egg from a mudhorn, which is not a small task. As the Mandalorian comes into contact with the mudhorn, everything goes sideways for him. The mudhorn is overpowering, and it's treating the Mandalorian like a rag doll and is just throwing him everywhere. And making his last stand, the Mandalorian just sits there with knife drawn as the mudhorn makes its final charge. But this is where the child comes in. The child does this again, or this, and exhibits force powers. It stops the mudhorn in its tracks, ends up levitating it, and the Mandalorian, in all of his confusion, looks back at the child and is like, what the hell's going on? Looks back at the mudhorn, he's like, oh yeah, this thing's still here, and takes advantage of the situation and disables the mudhorn. This causes the child to lose consciousness from overexertion, and so the Mandalorian takes him back to the Jawa. He delivers the egg. The Jawa start enjoying the yolk from the egg, and I assume it's a delicacy amongst them. And after that, he gets his parts back. After fixing his ship, he offers a crew ship to Kuil. He needs someone of his talents, but Kuil turns him down. But I have a feeling this isn't going to be the last we see of Kuil. The Ugnaught still has some life left in him for this series for me, and I'm sure we'll eventually see the circumstances change where he will become a crew member for the Mandalorian. As I was saying earlier, there's something endearing and adorable about the child traveling alongside the Mandalorian. It's funny, it's cute, and there's this sort of chemistry amidst the juxtaposition of these two different personas, one being a child who doesn't speak, looks like Yoda, acts like a child like Yoda, and just moves his head around and observes you, and then the Mandalorian, who is a bounty hunter. And there are frames where they mirror each other's body movements, like when the child is looking left And the Mandalorian is also looking left at the same time. This is an age-old technique to establish rapport between two people who can't speak to each other or don't speak to each other. But I just can't get over how adorable the child is. I really hope he doesn't deliver the child alive to the guild. I really hope he continues to travel alongside the child and this becomes sort of like a Joel and Ellie situation in a sense, or like a companion in an MMO that you'd summon where it just follows you around at your feet. I mean, it's quite humorous how, you know, as the Mandalorian engages in combat with the Jawa and the Mudhorn, you've got the child just sitting there lounging in its floaty container, observing him from a distance, just chilling. And there are some moments in this episode where mid-combat, he's just like right beside the Mandalorian and just floating there, just observing, just like, interesting this is. And now that I think about it, it is exactly like an MMO companion. You summon them, they're there, and you know, whatever is happening on the screen, they have little to do with it, whether you're fighting a raid boss or you're fighting some mobs out in the field. It's just tunnel visioned on following your every move and just being beside you. And there could be explosions happening around you. You could be dying. It just stands there. And this series is ongoing proof that life in the galaxy, outside of the saga films, away from the wars and the constant Jedi-Sith conflicts, remains a complete mystery to us. And it's quite an interesting narrative to explore. The music and the themes are slowly growing on me. And just as Sabine's orchestral suite from Rebels has become one of my favorite scores from the Star Wars universe, this one is actually getting up there really fast as well. It's a very memorable tune, and it just like gets stuck in your head, which is always a good thing, I think. Kuiil as well. Kuiil is starting to become one of my favorite characters from this series with as little time as I've had with him. Just like Sabine, she wasn't a main character in Rebels, but she ended up being my favorite character from that series. And Kuiil, there's no two ways about him, you know, he's a straight shooter, he's a moisture farmer, he knows how to fix things, and he knows how to get the job done. He serves people, he's got a very, very likable personality. You know, his exchange with the Mandalorian is just, you know, he's lived a life of servitude, and he's worked his whole life to live free from that servitude. And, you know, one of the things he says is, "You are my guest and I'm here to serve you." And that's an interesting concept and something that is not too lived by today's society. But beyond his personality, he's also got his one-liner that, you know, instantly becomes meme material, or at least one of those memorable phrases that will forever follow them into their future careers, which, by the way, Nick Nolte plays Kuiil, and that is, "I have spoken." Now, remember how I said there would be some narrative overlap between the Jedi and Sith and the Force? Well, the child shows Force powers. Yes, the child showed some Force sensitivity in the fight with the Mudhorn. Now, there's very little known about Yoda's species, but given the fact that Yoda and Yaddle were both on the Jedi Council, and now this new child has shown Force-sensitive powers, I am assuming that this species is highly sought after and is an endangered species, and a species that is innately sensitive to the Force. Now, I want to make a quick speculation about this child, and it's a bit of a reach, but stay with me here. Since The Mandalorian takes place after Return of the Jedi, and Yoda passes away in Return of the Jedi, could this be Yoda's reincarnation? And like I've been saying, little is known about this species, and we've seen very few of them. And while Yoda still exists in corporeal form within the Force, could this still be a reincarnation in the sense that we have a new Jedi Master in the making? And by Jedi Master, I mean gifted in the Force in the same vein that Yoda was gifted in the Force. We'll have to wait and see. But this is the long-form storytelling I've been looking for in Star Wars. Since Clone Wars and Rebels, and until Clone Wars returns, The Mandalorian positions itself as a very legitimate piece of the Star Wars universe that exists to tell a very real and dramatic story. What's more is that it tells an isolated story within each episode so far, in the same vein as Clone Wars and Rebels. There was an internal conflict that existed within each episode that lived inside the larger conflict between the Resistance and the fight against the Empire. In this case, the larger narrative in The Mandalorian is about his work with the Guild and how it's going to be affected by this new child. And within that larger narrative, in this episode, he gets his ship stripped by Jawas, he has to fight against a Mudhorn, he finds out that this child is force sensitive, and these are the stories that I love. While there is a single track to follow in the grand scheme of things, the long-form storytelling allows for smaller stories to be told within that. Stories that exist within the universe. It stands on its own, and it tells its own story without riding on the coattails of the Skywalker saga. And that's a good thing. What Solo failed to do, this series successfully does. It tells a story that I am legitimately excited and hyped to cover week after week. Disney Plus has a winner on its hands here with The Mandalorian, and it only further increases my excitement for an Obi-Wan Kenobi series of the same narrative caliber, of the same breadth and depth, in which we can explore all of the smaller stories that Obi-Wan encounters on Tatooine while exploring the larger narrative that he's Rey's grandfather. It just makes sense, you know? Oh my gosh, I'm just so excited. But in any case, that is my recap and review of episode 2 of The Mandalorian. If you guys enjoyed this video, leave a like and subscribe for more. I will be covering this series from week to week. And yes, as soon as Obi-Wan comes out, I'll be covering that as well. And I'll be covering all of the Marvel shows that are coming to Disney Plus as well. So subscribe, turn on notifications, and I'll see you guys in the next one. And as always, may the Force be with you.